For Real News is sponsored by assholes like you, so pay up, motherfucker. The second person mentioned and featured in this, the Real News Network feature, is Dan Kovalik, who is a human rights and labor lawyer, but they don't say anything else about his background. I wonder if they would have been willing to put this in the report. This is from the North American Congress in Latin America. It is an independent, non-profit organization founded in 1966 to provide information on trends in Latin America and relations between Latin America and the United States. So it is known to have leftist leanings, and here is what they say. It says, a legacy of Hugo Chavez 1 year after his death. Block flash. A week before that 1 year anniversary of Chavez's death, panelists Mark Weisbrot, Dan Kovalik, Julio Escalona, and James Early discussed the late President Chavez's global political and social legacy. Today, March 5th, marks the 1 year anniversary of the passing of Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez Frias. On February 26th, the Venezuelan diplomatic mission's Bolivarian Hall in Washington, D.C. held a forum titled The Legacy of Hugo Chavez. The panel focused on the political, social, and economic impact that this Latin American leader had on the poor, social movements, and the governments alike in the United States, Venezuela, and the region. Since his passing, there have been questions raised about the longevity and viability of many of the regional projects he spearheaded in the struggle for 21st century socialism. The panel also addressed the recent wave of violence in Venezuela and strategies moving forward. More telling is this article in CounterPunch, which is a traditional left-wing blog site. It says, tribute to Fidel Castro on his 90th birthday. Now, that turned out to be his last birthday, as he died that November last year. And it says, on Saturday, August 13th, the world will celebrate the 90th birthday of Cuban revolutionary leader Fidel Castro Ruz, the only individual ever to be acknowledged by the UN as a world hero of solidarity. It is very hard to think of a more important world leader than Fidel. The contribution he has made to the world socialist movement, to the third world liberation struggle, and to social justice has been monumental, especially when one considers that he has been the leader of a tiny country with roughly the same population as New York City. At the current time, the Colombian government and leftist FARC guerrillas are engaged in the peace process in Havana and are very near to reaching a final peace accord, in large part due to Fidel's efforts. As Nelson Mandela himself has acknowledged, South Africa is free from apartheid in no small measure due to Fidel's leadership in militarily aiding the liberation struggles in southern Africa, especially in Angola and Namibia, against the South African military, which was then being supported by the United States. In addition, the Latin American Medical School in Cuba, which trains doctors from all around the world, but particularly from poor countries, was Fidel's brainchild. Today, 70 countries from around the world benefit from Cuba's medical internationalism, including Haiti, where Cuban doctors have been, according to the New York Times, at the forefront of the fight against cholera. As we speak, Cuba has hundreds of doctors working in the slums of Caracas, Venezuela, where Venezuelan doctors fear to tread. There are Cuban-trained doctors in remote parts of Honduras which are otherwise not served by the Honduran government. Patients from 26 Latin American and Caribbean countries have traveled to Cuba to have their eyesight restored by Cuban doctors. Among this list is Mario Terán, the Bolivian soldier who shot and killed Che Guevara. The Cubans not only forgave Mario, but also returned his eyesight to him. Cuba even offered to send 1,500 doctors to minister to the victims of the Hurricane Katrina, though this kind offer was rejected by the United States. So, you can read the rest of the article later. But here we have another issue where the left is easily making their case that they don't know what the very idea of balance means. It's a very simple proposition. You cannot have two people that are deeply sympathetic to Chavismo comment on whether Chavismo's the Chavistas' electoral process is clean or tainted. I mean, you can either pretend to provide balanced coverage, or you can lie. And in this case, they have chosen to lie by omission. They have already placed as their two commentators a civil rights or a labor lawyer that has been very sympathetic to Chavismo and Chavez's main ally in the Latin American alignment of nations, Cuba. That's the one person, and then the other person is a quote-unquote journalist married to the Venezuelan ambassador to Ecuador, which is one of Chavez's main allies left in Latin America. So where's the balance here?
Inflated the turnout figure by 1 million. Joining us to analyze these developments in Venezuela is Dan Kovalik and Gregory Wilpert. Dan has recently returned from Venezuela, where he was an invited election observer by the CNE, and Dan is a labor and human rights lawyer who teaches international human rights at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. Good to have you with us, Dan.
Do you realize what they omitted there? They introduced one of them as an election monitor, forgetting that he's the husband of a Venezuelan ambassador and a crony of the regime. And the other person he introduces as a law professor from Pittsburgh, but he doesn't talk about any of his other publications.
Thank you. And also joining us is Gregory Wilpert. He is a real news correspondent and producer who's a long-time analyst of Venezuela and is currently in Caracas. Now, for complete transparency, I should say that Gregory Wilpert's wife is employed by the Foreign Ministry of Venezuela. So thank you so much.
That's kind of an admission, but they don't say how senior she is. She was the ambassador. Okay, do you understand what that means? That's basically like saying that if she were an ambassador for the Trump administration to a country like Britain, like one of our closest allies, they downplay that. They don't even mention that. And in fact, she used to be the vice consul to the U.S. Embassy in New York City, or the consulate in New York City.
Joining me, Greg. Thank you. Dan, let me start with you. Let's table the conversation about the controversy of the number of people that came out to vote on Sunday. We'll discuss that in a minute. But you were there as an election observer, invited by the National Electoral Council on Sunday. What did you see? What were your observations?
I went to several polling locations in the Vargas department, which is a state right outside of Caracas. And what I witnessed were people at the polls who were very enthusiastic about the voting process. Some of the polling areas were, in fact, seemed like parties. They were selling food and playing music, and people waited patiently in line for long periods of time in the hot sun to vote. So it was my impression from the people, at least that I saw, that they were excited to participate in this process.
And what did you make of the numbers that the CNE originally announced, that 8.1 million people voted? Did that seem realistic to you?
Well, of course. Now, again, I mean, in all fairness, the reason I trust it is not because I could have told from what I saw that there were 8 million people, because, of course, that's nationwide. But what I trust the CNE. I mean, the CNE is a separate branch of the Venezuelan government. You know, it's one of the few countries where the electoral commission is actually its own branch of government. It's independent of the executive branch. Jimmy Carter called their election process one of the best in the world.
Okay, let's examine what the Carter Center said about this election. What Dan Kovalik said in the previous frame is completely misleading about what happened this week. They were probably referring to past elections. It says here, the Carter Center expresses concern about recent events in Venezuela. This is dated August 1st, 2017. It says the Carter Center is dismayed by the deplorable events that have taken place in Venezuela in recent days. We condemn Sunday's process to elect a national constituent assembly. The process was carried out in the complete absence of electoral integrity, posing serious problems of legitimacy, legality, and procedure. The measures taken by the government to prevent freedom of expression, freedom of the press, and the right to peaceful demonstrations contravene the democratic values of plurality and the democratic and participatory clauses protected in the Venezuelan Constitution. We deeply regret the violence, repression, and riots that occurred during the election and the excessive and disproportionate use of force by security forces. The government of Venezuela has the responsibility to ensure the respect for the rule of law and fundamental rights. We reject the extrajudicial detention of opposition leaders Leopoldo Lopez and Antonio Ledesma on Tuesday morning by agents of the intelligence service. They're probably referring to the Sabin. The persecution of political dissent lays grounds for serious violations of human rights. Authorities must find workable solutions for citizen grievances. We urge political forces to reinstate rule of law in the 1999 Constitution and to restore the confidence that has been lost because of their attempt to establish divisive parallel institutions. So, and here's the link in Spanish. It says basically the same thing. So there you have it. He's basically attributing to the CNE the blessing of the Carter Center when no such thing has been recorded regarding this ballot. This man has lied blatantly on camera. Now I want you to listen to some of the things that are going on with the Venezuelan election process and think about how they're rationalizing what's going on. Do you see anything like that happening in the United States, which has been criticized roundly by the Real News and by extension Telesur and the Venezuelan sympathetic media?
Jimmy Carter called their election process one of the best in the world. It's had the same leadership for many years. I think if they said 8 million people voted, I would take that to the bank. You know, and if people.
So does the Real News have the same sort of trust in Chris Kovalik, who was the Secretary of State of Kansas? No. They never even utter a peep against this guy, claiming that Venezuela should be trusted, but they're willing to claim all these nefarious activities by extension by featuring Empire files without any editorial caveat as their source for a different report.
Want to challenge that? There's ways to audit those votes. You know, there's paper receipts. They even keep copies of the fingerprints of people who voted. I was actually an observer to the audit in 2013 when there was a presidential election for Maduro, and it was a very, very close election. And there was an audit of the vote count that I observed. And again, that could be done now.
So this is interesting. He mentioned fingerprints, and he mentioned a number of other auditing mechanisms. I wonder if the Real News and Telesur would acquiesce to fingerprints being used to screen in the United States for convicted felons who would be flagged as inadmissible, or for illegal immigrants who simply wouldn't be in the system.
In fact, in that way, it's much better than the U.S. electoral system, you know, which does not have paper receipts and is very hard to get a handle on truly what happened with the voting.
Now, Greg, what about you? The claim from the voting machine CEO that the Electoral Council inflated the turnout figures. How is that being received in Venezuela, and has the government or the CNE responded yet to that claim?
Well, there hasn't been an official response yet. Just on TV just now, a spokesperson didn't address the issue directly. She just said that we need to remember, just like Dan was saying just now, that audits are completely possible and transparent, and the opposition can participate in them. And so, in that case, you know, so she didn't really confirm or deny the numbers. She just said, you know, we can audit. And actually, that's been also the response on the part of some government representatives who said, you know, we're completely willing to do a recount of the people who voted, and rather than confirm or deny what the Smartmatic CEO said. Now, one has to keep in mind that the Smartmatic folks, of course, the CEO didn't actually present any evidence of his counsel. It's not completely clear exactly how he knows what the numbers are. I know that they participate in the process in various phases, but as far as I know, they're not involved in all of the phases. But the other thing is the opposition of course, has used this as a further proof to their claim that the complete vote was fraudulent, and have said that they will announce, or they will begin an investigation from the National Assembly, which they control. And that's, of course, perfectly also within their right. I don't think that that's going to be denied. But the key thing really is to initiate this audit process, and that the opposition participating. And one of the reasons, and one of the complaints actually for the opposition has always been that they reduced the number of audits. Well, part of the reason for that is that the opposition refused to participate in this entire process, and so the
Okay, this is a bit of news that's also controversial and probably a matter of whose side you take. This is from El Confidencial. I'll swing it over, not that it matters, it's in Spanish. Here it says, the Venezuelan parliament asks for an audit about the fraud election. Okay, it says Caracas, August 2nd. The Venezuelan parliament, in majority opposition, has approved today to request from the Smartmatic company an audit of those results for the election of the National Constitutional Assembly commissions who have had a manipulation, whose manipulation was denounced by that company, which was charged with counting the votes. It was approved by unanimity, the request for an investigation, a criminal investigation by the Public Ministry, which is the Ministry of Justice, and Smartmatic, of a fraud audit in the past election for the National Constituent Assembly, as announced in the Twitter account of the chamber. So basically what Greg Wilpert says here is basically bullshit, because he knows that in this case they've fully acquiesced to the need for an audit. So even if he's claiming that they're being wet blankets, they have requested an audit. Here's another thing that he claims is making it harder for the opposition to really make a case. Notice how ridiculous this sounds.
One of the key steps that was eliminated was the indelible ink. After you vote, you're supposed to put your finger into an ink box to show that you can vote again. And the opposition has claimed that it would allow people to vote more than once. Well, one of the reasons that was eliminated is that people were receiving threats for participating. Well, I don't know if that was the official reason, but at least I can imagine that was one of the reasons that it was eliminated, is that people were afraid to vote if it was completely clear that they might be persecuted as a result.
This is an example of somebody talking out of their ass. Let me explain. First of all, the indelible ink. I mean, he's claiming that unofficially that might have been the reason it was nixed, because of threats against people that did vote in the election. Okay, let's think about that for a second. This is from vtv.gov.v, which is the Venezuelan, I think it's Channel 8 in Venezuela. It's owned by the government. It says, know how to vote for the National Constitutional Assembly. Includes a video, which we're not going to watch because it would take too long. But I will post the link like everything. You can check it out, even if it's in Spanish. If you want to get your Spanish on, you want to get some un poco español, por favor, pasa. It says, Caracas, July 13th, 2017, the Vice President of the National Electoral Council, Sandra Oblitas, has explained the process for voting that will allow you to choose the National Constitutional Assembly this July 30th. In an interview with the program Con Amorín, transmitido por Venezuela de Televisión, so that's a program that they have on Thursday, June 29th, the rector, or whatever the fuck rectora means, the director indicated that the voter must verify the certain conditions to vote. In this election, we will have two determining factors, territorial and sectorial. Well, territory and sector. I'll have to ask one of my colleagues what this actually what the implications of this are later. So this verification can be accomplished through this site by the CNE. Then it says these are the steps to follow. It says in one time at the voting booth, you must enter your cédula de identidad, that's your national, I guess your social security company. You must verify your thumbprint of both hands on the biometric screen. Okay, then the voter is directed to the voting booth. Then there will be, you must choose a territorial vote through numbers that are accompanied by the names of the candidates. The names appear in the field territorial. So I guess those are the local candidates. So you can choose one person for your municipality, and only in the municipal capitals can you pick two. In the Distrito Capital, so that would be Caracas area, you can pick 7. You can pick, then you select the vote button for the sectorial, and then you say you make the choice with the numbers in with the button vote, votar, and the machine will print out the receipt that is for the vote, the comprobante de voto. Then you leave the station, and then you fold the dobla and place the ballot into the ballot box, caja de resguardo. Then you have the vice president of the electoral power, or the electoral commission, says that the voters must verify what is the number of the candidate with which they are associated from the preference on the list of candidates. So this is not a secret ballot by any means. So who's really going to be scared about this? In the commissions that are scheduled for July 30th, which is already passed, there will be elected 364 candidates for the territorial seats, and a further 173 candidates for the sectorial, which I guess is a different level or a different choice system. So who should be intimidated here? Is it the indelible ink people, or is it the people that are being asked by the government to tell who they voted for? This is not a secret ballot. It's not like the United States. You have to tell the government who you voted for. And if you voted for somebody who was against the government, are you supposed to be, happy about that? Or do you think that they're going to look kindly on the whole issue? Okay, beyond that, what do they say about the other issue where you have certain interferences done with the campaigning in the election? And you'll figure out what it is real quick.
Of the reaction from people in the opposition.
Greg, another issue that has come up recently is that the two opposition leaders, Leopoldo Lopez and Antonio Ledesma, who were both under house arrest shortly after the elections were held on Sunday, were taken into prison late Monday night. Many media outlets are presenting this as a crackdown on the opposition, including Reuters. Greg, what do you know about this particular case?
Well, first of all, they basically they have been convicted already for various crimes. The main one being for inciting to violence at various protests, and there's video evidence of this. So it seems pretty clear. They've on several occasions have in the past called for the military to rise up against the government. So basically, they've been calling for a coup. Now, they were allowed for various reasons. I think mostly health reasons to serve out the rest of their sentence at home, that is under house arrest. And one of the terms of, one of the conditions of their their house arrest was not to get involved in politics and not to make public statements about politics, but they did that precisely on the eve of the vote. And so that's why they were brought back into prison. So it wasn't like the government was specifically targeting opposition leaders or anything like that. They were basically reinstating an arrest or prison sentence that had previously been loosened. We'll have to see what goes from there. I think part of it would be also that they might be used for future negotiations, so to speak, with the opposition as a negotiating chip, so to speak, which was the speculation that might have been the case previously when they were given house arrest.
Dan, you're a human rights lawyer. You have been dedicating...
Okay, but before we see his response by that Dan Kovalik idiot, let's think about what he just said. He said that this is nothing to see here. They're just arresting guys that they incited for violence before and incited for a military coup. So what's the problem? I mean, they were violating the terms of their parole. Well, then maybe you should think about who you're working for. You are journalists that are pro-Chavistas. And Chavez himself tried to come to power in a coup in the 90s. This is from 1992, the Venezuelan coup attempts of 1992 were attempts to seize control of the government by the Hugo Chavez-led revolutionary Bolivarian movement 200. The first coup took place on February 4th, 1992 and was led by Chavez. A second coup attempt on November 27th, 1992 took place while Chavez was in prison but was directed by a group of young military officers who were loyal to the revolutionary Bolivarian movement 200. The coups were directed against President Carlos Andrés Perez and occurred in a period marked by neoliberal economic reforms, which were attempted in order to decrease the country's level of indebtedness, blah, blah, blah. The point being that if you are against coups and you think that that's really the problem, then you can't support Hugo Chavez, because he attempted to come to power through a coup, and in fact, he had other coups that were directed in order to get him free from prison. So, are you against coups or are you for coups? Because apparently when it's Hugo Chavez that commits the coups, you know, he's just fighting for human rights and against the neoliberal oppression and the capitalist system. But when you are seeing people that you claim are calling for military coups, and I think that they are, so I mean, let's not pussyfoot around it. These opposition leaders have been calling for coups. Then you say, oh, let's throw them in fucking prison. Fuck those guys. Furthermore, what about all these other celebrities in the United States that have called for military coups? Chelsea Handler, Amy Schumer, Rosie O'Donnell, Sarah Silverman. Should they all be thrown in prison now by your logic? Should we start? Because technically that's incitement to military uprising. And that's actually illegal by the United States Constitution. So what exactly is your standard for why opposition leaders should be thrown in prison? Because it seems to me, you know, Gregory Wilpert, that you're just conveniently picking and choosing when incitement to violence is wrong and when it's correct. So here's the question that she throws at Dan Kovalik. Now, she doesn't ask him anything, him being a human rights lawyer, about the opposition figures thrown in prison. But notice what he does end up having to answer and how he answers it.
It's lawyer. You have been dedicating your journalistic work and professional life to democratic processes and
except in Venezuela.
Observing them. Give us a sense of what you think this Constitutional Assembly was established to do, and was this a legitimate process?
Well, look, I think it was a legitimate process. First of all, folks need to understand that what happened on Sunday was that folks were elected to an assembly that's going to be able to redraft the current Constitution. Ultimately, 545 people were elected. I say ultimately because I think the indigenous representatives were elected on Monday. In any case, the folks that were elected were, you know, really average people representing the disabled, for example, working people, unionists, students, who are going to have a chance to put the interests of those types of people into this Constitution. These are people who, certainly before President Chavez, were invisible in Venezuelan society. These are the people that the current government, and may I say the revolution, has supported. And those are the type of people that showed up at the polls. I would welcome those people having a greater say in Venezuelan society. And ultimately, even though they will have a chance to draft the Constitution, and they'll be able to do it independently of the Maduro government, there will be a referendum later, which will allow voters throughout Venezuela to either accept or reject their Constitution, which I think is also being lost a lot in media.
All right, let's talk about what this Constitutional Assembly is. It is led by people like this: Aristóbulo Isturiz, who is the vice president, and he has basically served as the vice president of Venezuela, and previous to that he was the governor of Anzoátegui. Between 2001 and 2007 he was Chavez's Minister of Education. He was elected governor of Anzoátegui in 2012. And he, you know, this is a person who is now basically, he's given the second string position in the National Constituent Assembly. The other leaders are people like this: Julian Isaias Rodriguez Diaz, who is the former Attorney General under Chavez from 2000 to 2007, as well as the vice president of Venezuela for a few months. He is a longtime Chavista. He served as an attorney in the state of Arria. He's pretty much this old guy, born in 1942. That's a third-ranking person, and the top-ranking person is Delcy Rodriguez, who is the former Minister of Popular Power for Communication and Information in Venezuela from 2013 to 2014, meaning that she was basically the propaganda leader, and Minister of Foreign Affairs from 2014 to 2017. So the leadership matters, okay? You can't just say that if you're going to complain about Chris Kovalik being the head of the President's Commission on Electoral Integrity in the United States, then how can you now appoint, you know, support the appointment of an entire Constituent Assembly? By the way, I don't think you noticed, the entire Assembly is Chavistas, because this allegation or claim that 8 million people voted would mean that more people voted in the Constituent Assembly elections than in the last Assembly elections for the regular Parliament, when all the opposition voted there. This is just a blatant, I mean, you have how many pieces of evidence that this is a false vote? The Carter Center has called it a false vote. The company that ran it called it a false vote. And by the way, those were the company that ran it was contracted by the Chavez government. Okay, and then the Carter Center is a left-wing organization. Okay, how can you now claim that there is electoral integrity with all of those flaws so apparent? I want to conclude today with a warning that came from the past. This isn't the first time that Venezuela wanted to rewrite its constitution, and unfortunately it might be the last. I don't have much confidence that the people will be able to rise up as of today and throw off the Venezuelan government. But this was warned of before, and this statement that the country needs a new constitution directly contradicts what has happened in the past and the actual actions of the Chavez government from when he was still fresh from power. I'd like to direct your attention to an article written in 1999. This is from the Cato Institute. Now, the Cato Institute, before I get, set upon by the hounds, is admittedly a very libertarian and pro-capitalist organization that is against socialism throughout the world. And they said, and they published this: The hunt also rises. Today's Venezuelan vote could create a modern caudillo. For those of you that don't know what a caudillo is, it is an absolute ruler in many Latin American and Spanish-speaking countries. I think it was most famously used in reference to Francisco Franco, who was the dictator of Spain. It says, with one word, political buttons were here quietly urge voters to reject the proposed constitution in a referendum today. If adopted, now it starts with the word no, I missed that. So it says no with one word, political buttons here quietly urge voters to reject a proposed constitution in a referendum today. If adopted, however, this new charter would leave America's top oil supplier largely in the hands of a charismatic left-wing populist. The document, drafted by the National Constituent Assembly, strains beneath the weight of its 350 articles. America's has 7. Its chief sponsor is 45-year-old President Hugo Chavez Frias. Elected in December 1998, he first made headlines in 1992 for leading an attempted coup d'etat. Lately, he has played mini-me to Cuba's Dr. Evil. He says, I feel happy to follow the path of Fidel, Chavez said in Havana last month. Chavez's charter would make James Madison gag. This is a centralist, presidentialist constitution with no spread of power to the states and cities, says Enrique Capriles Rodonsky. As president of the Chamber of Deputies, this 26-year-old freshman legislator already functions as the Dennis Hastert of Venezuela. This is a corrupt constitution, Capriles adds, that will leave Venezuela backward and poor. This document is a campaign platform elevated to the supreme law of the land. Like a supermarket shopping cart on half-off day, it overflows with new entitlements, protections, and quote-unquote rights. Public retirement and health costs could skyrocket, for instance, since the Constitution promises everyone full benefits regardless of prior employment or payments into the service system. Pensions must be delivered as a non-profit public service. This seemingly would deprive Venezuelans of the private retirement accounts that have spread prosperity from Chile to Argentina to Mexico. Now, I think you'd probably have to agree that in Argentina that didn't really work out, and in Mexico I really can't say. Because in Argentina this was before they had a bank panic. Article 79 grants young people the right and the duty to play an active role in their development. The state will pitch in by providing access to first-time employment. Article 91 assures, so that's guaranteed employment. That's something that many socialists really urge for in the United States. This is exactly the type of democratic socialism that I am claiming will ruin the United States. Article 91 assures a minimum salary based on the annually indexed cost of a basket of goods. Article 107, so that's about minimum wage. Article 107 promises environmental education for all students. Article 111 outlines the rights to sports and recreation while the state guarantees promotional funds. Even though the ozone layer is shielded by Article 127, the entire Constitution is based on the premise that the state has inexhaustible resources, complains Jorge Olivaria, an assembly member who rejects the proposal. Property rights are forgotten until Article 115, while entire industries such as water are deemed strategic and thus open to state control. Someone with a well on his property may be told, your cows cannot drink this water until the people in the town below are finished with it, predicts Vladimir Chelminsky, executive director of the Caracas Chamber of Commerce. This constitution would impede unjustified downsizing, even if companies were overstaffed in lean times. Such constitutionally imposed red tape and requirement that the oil industry remain nationalized repels outside capital. There will be no new foreign investment, the Venezuelan Confederation of Industry declared in a statement. The president's foreign trips will be worthless because confidence in the country will simply be ruined. Venezuelan Credit Bank President Oscar Garcia Mendoza believes the Constitution would deepen the recession and not create opportunities. This would be terrible news for an economy that shrank 9.6% through June and reels under a 20% jobless rate. Garcia points to Article 305 mandating agricultural self-sufficiency. Will Venezuela grow all its own wheat or launch a wine industry? Wouldn't some food imports make economic sense? Team Chavez thinks otherwise. More than ever, Garcia says, they're trying to close Venezuela. Chavez, a former paratrooper, has become a dashing civilian. He recently appeared before a hall full of artists in a 3-button suit with a French blue shirt and equally blue tie. There's no turning back, he said. TV stations carried his remarks for nearly 3 hours, as they often must, even as they sacrifice advertising and programming. He has held viewers' attention by describing the coffee sips and singing folk songs. While Chavez remains popular, some find his battlefield rhetoric frightening. Sedice, Venezuela's premier libertarian think tank, invited Peruvian author Mario Vargas Llosa to lecture here. After the award-winning novelist criticized him in print, Chavez denounced Vargas Llosa as an illiterate intellectual. He added, "We'll welcome him with our cannons loaded." On November 24th, some 10,000 protesters marched here against the Constitution's proposed federal power grab. "No to centralism," read one broad white banner. "Respect the provinces," demanded another. The next day, Chavez said of his opponents, "Those who side with the no vote should get ready because the attack will be merciless. I will put my boots on and unsheathe my sword." Consequently, some Chavez critics now tread lightly. One prominent detractor itches to unmask Chavez in a leading U.S. newspaper that already has published his work. Today, he fears reprisals. As the referendum vote visibly nags at him, he wonders half seriously, will my next trip to Miami be voluntary? So the time is short for this video, but I want to conclude by saying this. The people that have continued to support the Chavez regime are openly collaborating with a real dictator and his stooge, Mr. Maduro. And they have now endeavored to reverse all of their own principles on U.S. soil and completely, basically consecrate themselves to the service of a revolution in a country that has been completely betrayed and devastated by it. So I urge you, through this medium that I have, to do something and support the people of Venezuela. You can find links I will put in the description to send aid to the Venezuelan people. Hopefully they will receive it and not have it confiscated by the regime. And I urge you to do everything you can. Write your congressman, write your senator, write Secretary of State Tillerson and tell him not to allow the Venezuelan regime to economically weasel out of what it has done to the Venezuelan people. I am not an interventionist. I am not for military intervention, and I condemn all of these blatant threats that are made to militarily intervene in South America. But I will not watch as all these people, they parrot this communist sympathy in order to safeguard their own feelings of what social justice is. Social justice has been executed in Venezuela, and the criminal, the person sentenced to this ungodly, illegal search and seizure and this unusual crime and unusual forms of punishment is the entire Venezuelan nation. And those of us that sit by and just observe it and say, well, that's the way it is. Well, it doesn't have to be that way if you stop these bullshitters from seizing the airwaves. And that's it for the real news. Hopefully next time there will be fewer hiccups and fewer coughs and hacks. And I hope that you help me help the people that of Venezuela to get their voice out there, because I've done as much as I can, and I'll keep doing as much as I can to help them through the Testigo Venezuela series and more projects. But they need your help. They need you to share, and they need you to lobby your own favorite creators to feature Venezuelan voices like themselves. Even if it's, I mean, the Bold Like a Leopard forum does not have much exposure. Neither does For Real News, which is, you know, that's a new toy of mine. These people need real help, and you can provide it if you email your favorite creators to feature the people that I have on this show, Carlos Cordova and Gabriel, and let's not forget Juan Carlo. Have a great evening, and maybe we'll hear from you in the next coming days, or you'll hear from us, vice versa. And enjoy the rest of your Sunday.